If you love me, buy me that car.
So buying you a car will prove how much I love you? All these women want my money, none of them truly loves me. I need to find out if they will love me without my money.
Look at him. He actually thinks a woman like me would want him? One of the wealthy girls laughed as the others burst into cruel laughter. Derek stood frozen beside the road, his old shirt stained with dirty water, his worn-out shoes covered in mud, and his heart heavy with humiliation. Just moments earlier, he had gathered the courage to tell one of them that he liked her. But instead of kindness, she had turned his feelings into a joke. What none of them knew was that the man they were mocking was hiding a secret that would completely change the way they saw him. They thought he was just another poor young man with nothing to offer, but they had no idea who Derek really was. And before that day ended, one unexpected act of kindness from a humble food vendor named Felicia would begin a chain of events that would leave those laughing at him wishing they had never turned him away. Derek was the only son of Mr. Richard, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country. From the day he was born, Derek had never known what it meant to struggle for basic things. He grew up in a huge mansion with several servants, expensive cars parked in the compound, private tutors, the best schools, and family vacations in different countries. If Derek wanted something, he usually got it. But his father never wanted him to become a spoilt young man who believed money could solve every problem. One evening, when Derek was still a boy, his father sat beside him and said, "My son, there is something money cannot buy." Derek looked at him curiously. "What is it, Dad?" "True love," his father replied. "Money can make people smile at you, but it cannot tell you whether they are smiling because of you or because of what you have." Derek did not fully understand those words then, but years later, he would remember them. As Derek grew into a young man, he became handsome, intelligent, respectful, and successful. Women noticed him everywhere he went. At first, Derek enjoyed the attention. He thought perhaps finding love would be easy. But he soon discovered something that hurt him deeply. Many of the women who approached him were more interested in his father's money than in him. During one of his first serious relationships, a woman spent more time asking about his lifestyle than asking about his dreams. "What kind of car do you drive?" she asked one evening. Derek smiled and said, "Why does that matter?" She laughed. "It matters because I don't want to struggle in marriage. I want a comfortable life." "And what if I didn't have a car?" Derek asked. Her smile disappeared. "What are you trying to say?" "Nothing. I just want to know if you would still like me without all these things." She stared at him for a moment before saying, "Derek, love is not enough. A woman needs security." That conversation stayed in his mind. Another woman asked him, "How big is your father's house?" Derek frowned. "Why do you want to know?" "I'm just curious. Would you still be interested in me if I lived in a small house?" She laughed. "Why are you asking strange questions?" Even women who claimed to love him eventually asked about his father's businesses, the family properties, the cars, and the kind of inheritance he would receive. Slowly, Derek began to feel tired. One evening, after another disappointing relationship ended, he sat alone in his room, staring through the window. He had everything people dreamed about, yet he felt completely alone. "What is wrong with me?" he whispered. "Why can't someone just love me?" That night, he went to his father's study. Mr. Richard looked up from his documents when Derek entered. "You look troubled," he said. Derek sat down heavily. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How do you know when someone truly loves you?" His father put down his pen and looked at him carefully. "Why are you asking me that?" Derek sighed. Because I don't think anyone loves me. They love what comes with me. His father remained silent for a moment. Tell me what happened. Derek explained everything. When he finished, his father leaned back and said, "My son, money attracts people, but it does not reveal their hearts." Derek looked at him. Then how do I know who truly loves me? His father shook his head. Sometimes you have to remove the money from the picture and see who remains. Those words gave Derek an idea. A few days later, he returned to his father and said, "Dad, I've made a decision." "What decision?" "I want to live like a poor man for a while." His father stared at him. "Are you serious?" "Very serious." "Derek, you have everything you need. Why would you deliberately make yourself suffer?" Derek looked straight into his father's eyes. "Because I need to know if someone can love me when I have nothing." His father sighed. "And what exactly do you plan to do?" "I'll leave the mansion. I'll dress simply, rent a small room, walk instead of driving, and let people believe I'm struggling." "And if you get hurt?" his father asked. Derek lowered his voice. "At least then I'll know the truth." His father did not like the idea, but he could see how deeply his son was hurting. After a long silence, he finally said, "Then be careful. You may discover something painful." Derek nodded. "I would rather know the truth than spend my whole life wondering." A few days later, Derek left his luxurious life behind. He moved into a small rented room in a modest neighborhood. He stopped wearing expensive clothes and watches. He put away his designer shoes and began wearing old, worn-out ones. His expensive car remained at home while Derek walked through the streets carrying a small bag. For the first time, people looked at him differently. Some women who would normally have noticed him barely looked at him. Others looked at his clothes and immediately looked away. Derek began approaching women naturally, trying to make conversations and get to know them, but the reactions were painful. One woman looked him up and down before saying, "I'm sorry, but I don't think we have anything in common." Derek asked gently, "You don't know me yet. How can you say that?" She pointed at his clothes. "I can already see the kind of life you can offer me." Another woman told her friends, "That guy looks like he doesn't even have money to feed himself." They laughed as Derek walked past. He pretended not to hear them, but every word stayed with him. Still, he continued his experiment. One afternoon, Derek saw a beautiful young woman standing with some of her friends. He gathered his courage and approached her. "Excuse me," he said politely. She turned toward him. "Yes?" "My name is Derek. I know this may sound strange, but I would like to get to know you." She looked at him from head to toe. Then she glanced at her friends. "You want to get to know me?" Derek nodded. "Yes." She suddenly laughed. "You?" Derek's face tightened. "Yes. Why are you laughing?" She pointed at his worn-out shoes. "Have you looked at yourself lately?" Her friend started laughing. Derek tried to remain calm. "I may not have much, but that doesn't mean I don't deserve respect." The woman laughed even harder. "Respect? You came here dressed like that to ask me out?" One of her friends added, "Maybe he thinks he's going to marry her with his empty pockets." More laughter followed. Derek stood there quietly, feeling the humiliation burning inside him. He finally said, "I only wanted to speak to you." The woman shrugged. "Well, now you've spoken. Please leave." Derek nodded slowly. "All right." He turned around and walked away. He kept his head high until he was far enough from them. Then he stopped and took a deep breath. His eyes became wet, but he quickly wiped them. Maybe Dad was right, he whispered to himself. Maybe I really need to find out who can see beyond money. He had no idea that his painful search was about to lead him to the one woman who would treat him differently from everyone else. One afternoon, Derek was walking through a busy shopping district when he noticed a group of young women standing beside a shiny luxury car. They were beautifully dressed, wearing expensive clothes and laughing loudly as they chatted among themselves. Derek tried not to pay attention to them and continued walking, but one of the women suddenly pointed at him. "Look at that man," she said, laughing. "Where did he come from?" Another woman looked at Derek's worn-out shirt and dirty shoes and covered her mouth. "Maybe he's looking for where they are giving free food." The women laughed. Derek heard every word, but he kept walking. He had already become used to people judging him by his appearance. However, one of the women was not satisfied with simply making fun of him. As Derek walked past their car, she picked up a small bottle of dirty water that had collected near the roadside and poured it toward him. The dirty water splashed all over his clothes, covering his shirt and trousers with mud. The women burst into loud laughter. "Look at him," one of them shouted. "Maybe now his clothes match his life." Derek stopped walking. For a few seconds, he simply stood there, covered in dirt, staring at the ground. His hands tightened into fists. He could have revealed who he was right there. He could have called his father's driver, returned to his mansion, and made sure those women regretted what they had done. But he remembered why he had started the experiment. He wanted to know who would respect him when they thought he had nothing. So he swallowed his anger and walked away. People nearby had seen everything, but nobody stepped forward to help him. Some simply stared. Others whispered among themselves before going back to whatever they were doing. Derek lowered his head and continued walking. He had barely taken a few steps when a woman's voice came from behind him. "Young man!" Derek stopped but did not turn around immediately. "Young man, please wait." He slowly turned and saw a young woman standing beside a small roadside food stand. Her name was Felicia. She was wearing a simple dress and an apron, and there was a tired but gentle look on her face. She walked toward him holding a clean piece of cloth. "Here," she said, extending it to him. "Wipe your face." Derek looked at the cloth, then at her. "It's okay, I'll manage." Felicia frowned. "Manage what? Look at you, you're covered in dirt." "I'm fine," Derek replied quietly. "I said I'm fine." Felicia shook her head. "You may say you are fine, but you don't look fine. Take it." Derek finally accepted the cloth. "Thank you." Felicia smiled slightly. "Come over here, you can clean yourself properly." Derek followed her to the food stand. As he wiped the dirt from his face, Felicia watched him quietly. She did not ask why he was dressed like that or where he lived. She simply noticed that he looked hungry. She turned toward the food she had prepared that morning. "Have you eaten today?" Derek paused. "I'm not really hungry." Felicia gave him a look. "Don't lie to me." Derek smiled faintly. "I'm serious." "And I'm serious too," she replied. "You look like someone who hasn't eaten since morning." Derek looked away. "I don't have money right now." Felicia immediately picked up a plate and served him a generous portion of food. She placed it in front of him. "Eat." Derek stared at the plate. "No, I can't take this." "Why not?" "Because I can't pay you." Felicia waved her hand. "Who said you have to pay me?" Derek looked at her in surprise. "Nothing is free." Felicia smiled. "Sometimes it is." Derek remained silent. She pushed the plate closer to him. "Eat before the food gets cold." He slowly sat down. "Why are you doing this?" Felicia shrugged. "Because you are hungry. You don't even know me." I don't need to know your whole life before giving you food. Derek stared at her. Nobody had spoken to him like that since he started pretending to be poor. Everyone else wanted to know what he had before deciding whether he deserved their attention. Felicia seemed interested only in whether he was hungry. Derek picked up the spoon and took his first bite. He had eaten meals prepared by the best chefs in expensive restaurants, but somehow that simple plate of food felt different. Perhaps because it was given to him without expectation. After eating for a while, Derek looked at Felicia and asked, "How much do I owe you?" She laughed. "I already told you, nothing. But you used your food, and you needed it. I can't just take it." Felicia smiled. "Then one day, when you have enough, you can help someone else who needs food. That's all." Derek became quiet. Her words touched something deep inside him. He looked at her and asked, "Do you always help strangers like this?" Felicia laughed softly. "Not every stranger, but I know what it feels like to be hungry and have nobody care." Derek looked at her carefully. "You've been through that?" "Yes," she replied. "Life hasn't always been easy for me." She turned back to her food stand. "But struggling doesn't mean we have to become hard-hearted." Derek did not know what to say. For the first time since he began his experiment, he felt something he had not expected to feel. He felt seen, not as a rich man's son, not as a poor man, just as Derek. From that day, something slowly changed between them. Derek began returning to Felicia's food stand. At first, he told himself he was only going there because he liked the food, but deep down, he knew there was another reason. He enjoyed talking to her. Felicia treated him like every other customer. She never asked where he lived, who his parents were, or how much money he had. When Derek had enough small money to buy food, he paid. When he didn't, Felicia simply told him to eat anyway. One morning, Derek arrived while Felicia was struggling to carry a heavy bag of supplies. "Let me help you," he said. "You don't have to," she replied. "I can manage." Derek smiled. "You said the same thing when you saw me covered in debt." Felicia laughed. "Fine, help me then." He carried the bag inside and arranged the supplies for her. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome." From that day, Derek began helping whenever he could. Sometimes he swept around the stand, sometimes he carried water, sometimes he simply sat nearby and kept her company when business was slow. Their conversations became deeper. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, and the kind of lives they hoped to have someday. One evening, Derek asked, "Felicia, if you had enough money to change your life, what would you do?" She thought for a moment. "I would open a proper restaurant." Derek smiled. "That's all?" "That's not all," she said. "I would employ people who are struggling like me. I know what it feels like to have nothing, so I would want my success to help other people." Derek looked at her with admiration. "You really think like that?" Felicia smiled. "What is the point of having something good if you cannot use it to make someone else's life better?" Derek's eyes lowered. He was beginning to fall deeply in love with her. But there was one thing that frightened him. Felicia believed he was poor. She had no idea that the man sitting beside her had more money than she could ever imagine. One afternoon, Derek apologized after realizing he could not afford to buy anything from her. "I'm sorry, Felicia. I don't have enough money today." She laughed. "Why are you apologizing?" "Because I keep coming here. And I don't want you to think I'm taking advantage of you." Felicia looked at him seriously. "Derek, you don't have to buy expensive things to prove that you care about someone." He stared at her. She continued, "Good character is worth more than expensive clothes, big houses, and fancy cars." Derek's heart skipped a beat. Those were almost the exact words he had been hoping to hear from someone. He looked away because he did not want her to see the emotion in his eyes. But while Felicia continued preparing food, Derek quietly made a decision in his heart. He knew he could no longer pretend that he was just a poor young man who had nothing. He had found the woman he had been searching for. But now he had to face the hardest question of all. What would happen when Felicia finally discovered the truth? Derek knew he had already grown close to Felicia, but there was still a small part of him that was afraid. What if she was only kind because she believed he had nothing? What if her feelings changed the moment she discovered the truth? He decided to test her one more time. One evening, while they sat beside her food stand after the day's work, Derek became unusually quiet. Felicia noticed immediately. "What is wrong with you today?" she asked. Derek sighed. "Felicia, there is something I need to tell you." She put down the spoon in her hand. "You are beginning to scare me. What happened?" Derek looked at her seriously. "I don't have a wealthy family somewhere waiting to rescue me. The truth is, I'm struggling to survive." Felicia stared at him for a few seconds. "I know." Derek looked surprised. "You know?" She nodded. "I may not have money, Derek, but I have eyes. I can see that life has not been easy for you." "And you're not disappointed?" he asked. "Why would I be?" "Because I don't have much to offer you." Felicia smiled gently. "Who told you that money is the only thing a person can offer?" Derek looked down. "I have dreams, Felicia. There are so many things I want to accomplish, but I don't have the money to make them happen." Felicia reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "Then start with what you have." "And what if what I have isn't enough?" Derek asked. "It may not be enough today," she replied, "but tomorrow can be different." Derek remained silent. Felicia squeezed his hand. "Money can come tomorrow, Derek, but if you lose your good heart today, you may never get it back." Derek's eyes became wet. "You really believe that?" "I do," she smiled. "I would rather struggle beside a good man than live comfortably beside someone with a bad heart." Derek looked at her for a long moment. Deep inside, he knew he had finally found the woman he had been searching for. But while Felicia continued believing he was poor, his secret became heavier every day. He wanted to tell her the truth, but he was afraid that the moment she discovered who he really was, everything between them would change. A few days later, Derek's father called him. When Derek arrived at his father's study, Mr. Richard looked at him and smiled. "So, how long are you planning to continue this?" Derek sat down. "Continue what?" His father laughed softly. "Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. You have been away from home for months." Derek lowered his eyes. "I know. Have you found what you are looking for?" Derek smiled. "Yes, Dad." His father studied his face. "Then why are you still hiding?" Derek sighed. "I'm afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that when she finds out who I am, she'll change." Mr. Richard leaned forward. "My son, if she truly loves you, stop hiding from her. You wanted to know whether she could love Derek without the money. You have your answer." Derek nodded slowly. "You're right. Then tell her the truth." Derek smiled. "I will." But Derek did not want to simply walk up to Felicia and tell her. He wanted to make the moment unforgettable. He decided to arrange a grand celebration at his father's mansion and invite Felicia without telling her that the event was actually about him. He arranged for a beautiful designer dress to be delivered to her, along with an elegant invitation. When Felicia received the package, she was completely confused. She opened the box and stared at the expensive dress. "This cannot be mine," she whispered. The person who delivered it smiled. "It is for you." Felicia looked at the invitation. "Who sent this?" "The invitation will explain everything." She carefully opened it and read that she had been invited to a special celebration hosted by one of the country's most successful businessmen. Her heart began beating faster. She immediately thought about Derek. Why would a wealthy businessman invite me? she wondered. When Derek came to see her later that day, she held up the invitation. "Derek, do you know anything about this?" He tried to hide his smile. "Why would I know?" "Because this doesn't make sense. Look at this dress. It's probably worth more than everything I own." Derek laughed softly. "Maybe someone simply wants you to attend." Felicia shook her head. "I'm not comfortable with this." "Why?" "Because I don't belong in places like that." Derek looked at her seriously. "Never say that about yourself." "But look at me." "I see a good woman," he replied. "That's enough." Felicia looked at him quietly. "Will you be there?" Derek hesitated for a moment. "Just go. Trust me." On the day of the celebration, Felicia finally put on the dress. She stood in front of the small mirror in her room and could hardly recognize herself. "This is too much," she whispered. She felt nervous throughout the journey. When she finally arrived at the massive mansion, she became even more overwhelmed. Luxury cars filled the driveway. Security guards stood at the entrance, while elegantly dressed servants welcomed the arriving guests. Felicia stepped out of the car slowly and looked around. "What am I doing here?" she whispered to herself. She had never seen anything like it. She walked into the mansion, holding her small handbag tightly. Inside, hundreds of wealthy guests were gathered, dressed in expensive clothes and jewelry. Felicia felt out of place. She looked around anxiously, hoping to find Derek. "Maybe I should leave," she whispered. But before she could turn around, she noticed something strange. The conversations around her slowly became quieter. People began turning toward the entrance. One by one, everyone stopped talking. The entire room suddenly fell silent. Felicia looked up, confused. "What is happening?" she whispered. Everyone seemed to be waiting for someone important to appear. Then, the grand doors at the end of the hall slowly opened, and Felicia's heart began pounding as she stared toward the entrance. The grand doors slowly opened, and a man dressed in an expensive black suit walked into the hall. Felicia froze. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. She stared at the man as he walked confidently into the room, surrounded by people who greeted him with respect. Then she recognized him. "Derek," she whispered, almost afraid that her eyes were deceiving her. Derek stopped when he heard her voice. He looked directly at her and smiled. "Yes, Felicia, it's me." She shook her head slowly. "No, this can't be you." Derek walked toward her. His expensive suit fitted him perfectly. A luxury watch shone on his wrist, and his shoes looked nothing like the worn-out pair she had seen him wearing every day. But his face was still the same face she had grown to love. Felicia looked around the enormous hall, then toward the wealthy guests who seemed to know him. "What is going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. Derek stopped in front of her. "Felicia, there is something I should have told you a long time ago." She stared at him. "Who are you?" Derek took a deep breath. "My name is Derek Richard, and I am the only son of Mr. Richard." Felicia's eyes widened. Mr. Richard? She had heard that name many times. Everyone knew the billionaire businessman. She looked at Derek in disbelief. "You mean you're his son?" Derek muttered. "Yes." Felicia took a step backward. "But you told me you were struggling. You told me you had nobody." "I know," Derek said quietly, "and I'm sorry." Felicia's eyes began filling with tears. "Why would you do that to me?" Derek looked down for a moment. "Because I wanted to know if someone could love me without knowing what I had. I have spent years meeting women who were interested in my money, my father's name, and the life that came with it. I didn't know who was genuine anymore." He paused and looked into her eyes. "So I pretended to be poor." Felicia wiped a tear from her cheek. Derek continued. I met women who laughed at me. Some rejected me because of my clothes. Some insulted me because they thought I had nothing. And then I met you." Felicia remained silent. "Derek, you were the only person who helped me when you believed I had nothing," Derek said. "You gave me food when you thought I couldn't afford it. You gave me something to clean myself after those women humiliated me. You never asked what I could give you in return." Felicia's lips trembled. "Why didn't you tell me?" Derek sighed. Because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" she asked. "Afraid that everything would change the moment you knew who I was. I was afraid that the woman who cared about the poor Derek would disappear when she discovered the billionaire's son." Felicia shook her head as tears rolled down her cheeks. "You should have trusted me." "I know," Derek replied, "and I regret hurting you. But please believe me when I say this. What I felt for you was never part of the test. I fell in love with you because of who you are." Felicia looked at him for a long moment. Then she quietly said, "Derek, I never cared about your money." He nodded. "I know. I cared because you were kind to me. You helped me when you could. You listened to me. You made me laugh. You made me feel like my dreams were possible." She wiped her tears. "You didn't need to be a billionaire for me to care about you." Derek's eyes became wet. "And you didn't need to have money for me to love you." The room became silent as everyone watched them. Derek gently took Felicia's hand. "There is one more thing I want to ask you." Felicia looked at him nervously. Derek slowly went down on one knee. A gasp moved through the room. He brought out a beautiful diamond ring and held it toward her. "Felicia, you loved me when you thought I had nothing. You fed me when you thought I couldn't pay. You stood beside me when the world laughed at me. You saw a man when everyone else only saw poverty. I don't want to spend another day without you. Will you marry me?" Felicia covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. For several seconds, she could not speak. Then she looked at the man kneeling before her and remembered the day she had given him that simple plate of food. She smiled through her tears. "Yes, Derek, I will marry you." The entire hall erupted in applause. Derek stood up, slipped the ring onto her finger, and pulled her into his arms. Felicia cried against his chest as he held her tightly. For the first time in his life, Derek no longer wondered whether someone loved him for himself. He finally knew the answer. News of Derek's engagement spread faster than anyone expected. Within hours, pictures of him and Felicia were everywhere on social media. People were amazed to see the billionaire's son standing proudly beside a woman who had come from a very humble background. But while thousands of people celebrated the couple, several women who had once rejected Derek were staring at their phones in complete disbelief. One of them zoomed in on his picture and suddenly froze. "Wait, this is him?" she whispered. Her friend looked over. "Who?" She pointed at the screen. "The poor man I rejected." Her friend laughed nervously. "You mean the man who is now engaged to a billionaire's son?" "No," she replied, her voice shaking. "He is the billionaire's son." She remembered the day she had laughed at his old clothes and told him he could never provide the kind of life she wanted. Another woman had a similar reaction. She remembered looking Derek up and down before telling her friends, "He is not good enough for me." Now she stared at the pictures of him standing beside expensive cars and surrounded by wealthy guests. "I rejected him," she whispered. Then she covered her face with her hands. But the greatest shock came to the wealthy girls who had splashed dirty water on Derek. When they saw his picture online, their laughter disappeared. One of them dropped her phone on the table. "That's him!" The others gathered around her. "Are you sure? Look at his face. It's the same man." They stared in silence at the screen. The woman who had poured the dirty water over him suddenly remembered how he had stood there without fighting back. She remembered how they had laughed while he walked away covered in mud. "We didn't know," she whispered. One of her friends replied, "That's exactly the problem. You treated him badly because you thought he was poor." They all felt ashamed. Soon, messages began arriving on Derek's phone. "Derek, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I didn't know who you were. Can we talk? Some even tried calling him directly. But Derek did not respond. He had no interest in going back to people who only wanted him after discovering his wealth. He had already found the one person who loved him when she believed he had nothing. Meanwhile, preparations for Derek and Felicia's wedding began. The wedding quickly became one of the biggest social events in the city. Celebrities, business leaders, family members, and important guests filled the venue. Expensive cars lined the streets outside, while photographers waited eagerly for the bride and groom. When Felicia finally appeared at the entrance in her stunning wedding gown, the entire hall seemed to fall silent. She slowly walked down the aisle, her eyes fixed on Derek. Derek watched her with tears in his eyes. As she came closer, he remembered the first day they met. He remembered the dirty clothes, the humiliation, and the plate of food she had given him when everyone else had treated him like he was worthless. When Felicia finally reached him, Derek leaned closer and whispered, "You are still the woman who gave me food when you thought I had nothing." Felicia smiled through her tears and replied, "And you are still the man I loved before I knew you were rich." They exchanged their vows and promised to stand by each other through every season of life. When they finally said, "I do," the entire hall erupted in applause. After the wedding, Felicia's life changed completely. She moved into Derek's luxurious home, but Derek never wanted the wealth to change the woman he had fallen in love with. He always reminded her of where their story began. Together, they established a foundation that provided food and support to poor families. Felicia also turned her small food stand into a successful restaurant business. She opened branches in different parts of the city, but she never forgot the people who had once stood where she had stood. Whenever she saw someone struggling, she remembered how she had once given Derek a free plate of food without knowing that he would one day change her life. Despite becoming wealthy, Felicia remained humble and kind. She never treated poor people differently because she knew exactly what it felt like to have very little. And Derek finally understood the lesson his father had tried to teach him years earlier. Wealth could attract attention, but it could never guarantee genuine love. The women who had mocked him eventually learned that lesson too. They had judged him by his clothes, his shoes, and what they thought he could afford. Felicia had looked beyond all of that and seen the person underneath. Derek often told her, "If you had known who I was that first day, I don't know if I would have trusted your kindness." Felicia would smile and reply, "Then it is a good thing I didn't know." Their story became a reminder to everyone who heard it that sometimes the person you overlook because they appear to have nothing may be carrying something far more valuable than money, a good heart. And Derek never forgot the woman who proved to him that true love does not begin with a bank account. It begins with kindness, honesty, and a heart that chooses to care even when there is nothing to gain. The lesson was simple. Never judge someone's worth by their appearance, clothing, or financial situation. Money can buy comfort, but it cannot buy a genuine heart. The right person will love you before they know what you have.